Hi friends, it's Deanna Willison with Our Blooming Catholic Life. And back in the good old days when I was a homeschool tutor, I've taught a lot of science, starting out with Lego science before they had the whole robotics thing. Yeah, I taught simple machines all the way up to mechanical engineering, and then I was a robotics coach. I have taught biology as tutor. I've tutored in physical science, physics, a lot of biology, marine biology, chemistry. Natural history is hands down my favorite class to teach, and it is foundational. Most public schools do not teach natural history. You can do it over the summer. It is a super fun course to do over the summer because it's so hands-on, because there's so many great animals and plants out there to really get your hands in and interact with. Oh, that sounded terrible. Get your hands on to view. They're out there. You can view them. You can interact with them. Okay, yes. I don't think we did dissections in natural history. I'm not going to guarantee that, though. Anyway, this is a book that's recommended by a lot of homeschool co-ops. And so let's just look at it. I know some of you are probably freaking out and some of you are probably cheering. So let's give it a minute and look at it. It is Darwin's Black Box. This is the 10th anniversary edition, so it has a new afterwards. The subtitle is probably The Biochemical Challenge to Evolution. It is by Michael J. Is that Behe? B-E-H-E. Let's read some of the comments. This is by the Washington Times. I'm not even familiar with that publication, but this is a review. A persuasive book. It will speak to the layman and perhaps even to professional evolutionists as well, if they are able to suspend for a little while their own judgment about origins, the ultimate black box. David Berlinski, author of A Tour of the Calculus, says it's an argument of great originality, elegance, and intellectual power. No one can propose to defend Darwin without meeting the challenges set out in this superbly written and compelling book. George Gilder in National Review has said overthrows Darwin at the end of the 20th century in the same way that quantum theory overthrew Newton at the beginning. H. Alan Orr in The New Yorker says Behe is the most prominent of the small circle of scientists working on intelligent design, and his arguments are by far the best known. The New York Times Book Review says when examined with the powerful tools of modern biology, but not with its modern prejudices, life on the biochemical level can be a product, Behe says, of only intelligent design. Coming from a practicing biologist, this proposition is close to heretical. It is published by Simon and Schuster.com. It runs under $20. It's not a thin book. It's not huge, but it's not thin. Let's get in here. Does oddly have a diagram. It's a bit of a mechanical looking diagram there, right? Let's see. Interesting. So contents. The contents, it leaves a tiny bit to be desired because it doesn't have the black ... taking the subject over to the page number, but you can see why this book is meant to be read from beginning to end. It is a bookmark book. Go grab yourself a bookmark. So there is a preface, and then there are, 3 sections. So this is the total table of contents. Part 1 is the box is open. Part 2 is examining the contents of the box. And part 3 is what does the box tell us? Let's go in here. Part 1, the box is open, has Lilliputian biology, and 2 is nuts and bolts. Part 2 has examining the contents of the box, right? Row, row, row your boat. Rube Goldberg in the Blood, From Here to There, A Dangerous World, and Roadkill. Part 3, what does the box tell us? Publish or perish, intelligent design, questions about design. 11 is science, philosophy, religion. Then there's an afterword, 10 years later. Appendix is the chemistry of life. There are notes, acknowledgments, and an index in the back. It is easy to see when you start a section, right? And this starts out with Roman numerals for the preface, center, bottom of the page. Let's just cover that. When it's not an introductory, the outside corner edges are where the page number is, and then it has the section name is on the left-hand page, and the immediate chapter is on the right-hand page. So pretty easy to find. It does look as though there are subheadings as well, which are clear to see, because look, we just found one. The print is probably a standard Times New Roman. There are diagrams, some nice biology diagrams in there. Yeah, so the chapters are marked same as our preface was, easy to find, right? Let's look at some of those features in the back. I know some of you are dying to get in here, so let's just get there. Oh, the appendix is kind of a large section. The afterword is the 10 years later. Okay. And then the appendix, the chemistry of life. It says this appendix will give the interested reader an overview of biochemical principles that undergird life. It is not necessary to read the appendix to follow the arguments of the book, but it will set those arguments within a larger framework. So you may want to read this first. If you're not familiar with biochemistry, you may want to read this back section first. Lovely, great that I caught that. It's been a couple years, so I'd forgotten. Here I will discuss cells and the structure of several major classes of biomolecules, proteins, nucleic acids, and briefly lipids and carbohydrates. I will then focus on the question of how genetic information is expressed and propagated. Of course, in such a short space, the description must be sketchy, so I urge those who become intrigued by the mechanisms of life to borrow an introductory biochemistry text from the library. A fascinating Lilliputian world awaits. If you aren't getting that Lilliputian reference, that is a literary reference. It's a classic. I believe it's from Gulliver's Travels. So it starts out talking about cells and membranes. There are diagrams back here. Let me read a bit of this sciencey part for you in the back. Again, there are lots of pictures and diagrams in this back section, but let me just read you a section so that you can see how in-depth the science gets and how easy or hard it will be for you to understand it. Cells and membranes. The human body is composed of hundreds of trillions of cells. Other large animals and plants are also conglomerations of enormous numbers of cells. As the size of an organism decreases, however, the number of cells decreases also. For example, the small worm C. elegans contains only about 1,000 cells. As we travel down the size scale, we ultimately reach the unicellular phyla, such as yeast and bacteria. No independent life occurs below this level. Examination of its structure shows why the cell is the fundamental unit of life. The defining feature of a cell is a membrane, a chemical structure that divides the outside world from the interior of the cell. With the protection of the membrane, a cell can maintain different conditions inside than prevails outside. For example, cells can concentrate nutrients in their interior so they are available for energy production and can prevent newly made structural materials from being washed away. In the absence of a membrane, the large array of metabolic reactions necessary to sustain life would quickly dissipate. Okay, I can see right away that some people are going to find that language a little challenging. A homeschool mom who has recently been teaching some form of biology or natural history or whatnot is not. She's probably going to have those words. It's very creepy. I've been getting a lot of random text messages lately, so if you hear my phone dinging, I need to stop and clear it because otherwise it's going to keep dinging whoever this creeper is. Okay, so the chemistry of life. There are some diagrams. Do you remember these guys from chemistry? I don't know if you do. I've taught chemistry, so I do. I've taught chemistry within the last 10 years, so those diagrams make sense to me. It's not a huge section, so 294, when did it start? Almost 20 pages exactly on that. Then the notes, so it doesn't have footnotes, it has endnotes, and they're listed out by section of the book, by chapters, and they start renumbering again at every chapter. So you may want to put a bookmark back there because they aren't just citations. They are, some of them, a paragraph or two of notes. I mean, some are just a straight up citation, but, oh my goodness, like this one can see note number 3 over here is like half a page at least, and it's going on to the next page. There's another huge section, about a third of the page on the next one. So there is a decent amount of notes back there. The index then, it's pretty easy to find. It's alphabetical. It's done very well. It does tell you there's actually a follow-up book which combines the latest research on genetics, up-to-date laboratory studies, and detailed mathematical law to prove once and for all that the universe and life on Earth are designed, and that's called The Edge of Evolution. It was going to be available in June 2007 or wherever books are sold. So yeah, this book is a little bit older. Let me see. Was there a date? It was originally done in 1996 and then 2006, so I wonder if there might not be a more updated one. Let's read a little bit in the preface. I know this is a very long Wednesday video for you, but I think people are really going to be interested and want to know more about this. So the preface starts out, a molecular phenomenon. It is commonplace, almost banal, to say that science has made great strides in understanding nature. The laws of physics are now so well understood that space probes fly unerringly to photograph worlds billions of miles from Earth. Computers, telephones, electric lights, and untold other examples testify to the mastery of science and technology over the forces of nature. Vaccines and high-yield crops have stayed the ancient enemies of mankind, disease and hunger, at least in parts of the world. Almost weekly announcements of discoveries in molecular biology encourage the hopes of cures for genetic diseases and more. Yet understanding how something works is not the same as understanding how it came to be. For example, the motions of the planets in the solar system can be predicted with tremendous accuracy. However, the origin of the solar system, the question of how the sun, planets, and their moons formed in the first place, is still controversial. Science may eventually solve the riddle. Still, the point remains that understanding the origin of something is different from understanding its day-to-day workings. Science's mastery of nature has led many people to presume that it can, indeed must, explain the origin of nature and life. Darwin's proposal that life can be explained by natural selection acting on variation has been overwhelmingly accepted in educated circles for more than a century, even though the basic mechanisms of life remained utterly mysterious until several decades ago. Modern science has learned that ultimately, life is a molecular phenomenon. All organisms are made of molecules that act as the nuts and bolts, gears and pulleys of biological systems. Certainly, there are complex biological features, such as the circulation of the blood, that emerge at higher levels, but the gritty details of life are the province of biomolecules. Therefore, the science of biochemistry, which studies these molecules, has as its mission the exploration of the very foundations of life. Since the mid-1950s, biochemistry has painstakingly elucidated the workings of life at the molecular level. Darwin was ignorant of the reason for variation within a species, one of the requirements of his theory. Tons of parenthetical things here, like the circulation of the blood, one of the requirements of his theory. Lots of things are put in parentheses that often may be put into commas, these little clauses here. See, there's a bunch of those. You're going to get used to that way he does that. He also does it if, like he says, video cassette recorder, then he has in parentheses VCR. So he's going to do it for abbreviations as well. Let's look down here. Evolution is a flexible word. It can be used by one person to mean something as simple as a change over time, or by another person to mean descent of all life forms from a common ancestor, leaving the mechanism of change unspecified. In its full-throated biological sense, however, evolution means a process whereby life arose from non-living matter and subsequently developed entirely by natural means. That is the sense that Darwin gave to the word and the meaning that it holds in the scientific community. And that is the sense in which I use the word evolution throughout this book. It is very important. A lot of textbooks now use the expressions macroevolution and microevolution as well. It says, apologia for details. Several years ago, Santa Claus gave my oldest son a plastic tricycle for Christmas. Unfortunately, busy man that he is, Santa had no time to take it out of the box and assemble it before heading off. The task fell to Dad. I took the parts out of the box, unfolded the assembly instructions, and sighed. There were 6 pages of detailed instructions. Line up with 8 different types of screws, Insert 2 1.5-inch screws through the handle into the shaft. Stick the shaft through the square hole in the body of the bike, and so on. I didn't want to even read the instructions because I knew they couldn't be skimmed like a newspaper. The whole purpose is in the details. But I rolled up my sleeves, opened a can of beer, and set to work. After several hours, the tricycle was assembled. In the process, I had indeed read every single instruction in the booklet several times to drill them into my head and perform the exact actions that the instructions required. My aversion to instructions seems to be widespread. Although most households own a video cassette recorder, VCR, most folks cannot program them. That these technological wonders come with complete operating instructions, but the very thought of tediously studying each sentence of the booklet makes most people delegate the job to the nearest 10-year-old. Some things never change. Unfortunately, much of biochemistry is like an instruction book, in the sense that the importance is in the details. A student of biochemistry who merely skims through a biochemistry textbook is virtually certain to spend as much of the next exam staring at the ceiling as drops of sweat trickle down his or her forehead. I'm going to jump in. You can see he does occasionally use some very large words like conflagration and I've already forgotten the other one, elucidation. There are some very hefty words in here, so not the best choice there. I'm sure he's used to speaking that way. You wish the editor would have been like, simplify this even more. Let's just grab another section further in the book to see how that goes. I'm on page 78 in the Rube Goldberg in the Blood section. Blood behaves in a particular way. Blood behaves in a peculiar way. When a container of liquid, like a carton of milk or a tank truck filled with gasoline, springs a leak, the fluid drains out. The rate of flow can depend on the thickness of the liquid. For example, maple syrup will leak more slowly than alcohol, but eventually it all comes out. No active process resists it. In contrast, when a person suffers a cut, it ordinarily bleeds for only a short time before a clot stops the flow. The clot eventually hardens and the cut heals over. Blood clot formation seems so familiar to us that most people don't give it much thought. Biochemical investigation, however, has shown that blood clotting is a very complex, intricately woven system consisting of a score of interdependent protein parts. The absence of or significant defects in any one of a number of the components cause the system to fail. Blood does not clot at the proper time or at the proper place. Some tasks leave little room for error. For example, the most frightening part of an airplane ride for me is the landing. Much of the fear comes from knowing that the plane has to skip over the houses or trees that are often near an airport, and also from realizing that the plane has to stop before it goes off the end of the runway. A few years ago, a plane skidded off a runway at LaGuardia Airport into Long Island Sound, killing several people, and it seems that headlines frequently tell planes crashing just short of the runway. If the runway were 20 miles long instead of 1 mile, I, for one, would feel more secure. The landing of an airplane is just one example of a system that has to work within very tight restrictions to avoid disaster. Even the Wright brothers had to worry about landing properly. A little too short or a little too long on the landing, or aiming a little too low or a little too high, and the plane and passengers are in big trouble. But imagine the greater difficulty of landing a plane on autopilot with no conscious agent to guide it. Blood clotting is on autopilot, and blood clotting requires extreme precision. When a pressurized blood circulation system is punctured, a clot must form quickly or the animal will bleed to death. If the blood congeals at the wrong time or place, though, then the clot may block circulation as it does in heart attacks and strokes. Furthermore, a clot has to stop bleeding all along the length of the cut, sealing it completely. Yet blood clotting must also be confined to the cut, or the entire blood system of the animal might solidify, killing it. Consequently, the clotting of blood must be tightly controlled so that the clot forms only when and where it is required. Okay, so you can see the author uses some really big words and then uses some really great examples to go along with that to simplify it. Beautifully written. Whether or not you want to agree or disagree with the argument, it's a really well-written book, and I invite you to get in and join the conversation. Friends, may God bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and to be gracious unto you. And may the good Lord bless you. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.